Imagine sitting down for dinner 2,000 years ago. No pizza, no burgers, no sugar-loaded desserts. Instead, a piece of rough bread, dipped in olive oil, maybe some dried fish and watered-down wine. Sounds simple? But here's the truth. The food of biblical times wasn't just about survival. It shaped entire civilizations, defined wealth and poverty, and even carried deep spiritual meaning. Some meals were sacred, some foods were forbidden, and some could actually get you killed. Today, we're stepping inside the kitchens of the ancient world to discover what people really ate 2,000 years ago and why it mattered more than you think. The world of biblical times was harsh and unpredictable. The land was dry, the sun relentless, and every harvest depended on rain that might never come. People didn't eat for pleasure, they ate to survive. A good season meant full storage jars. A bad season meant hunger, or worse. Most families lived simply. They didn't have markets full of endless choices. What you ate depended on what you could grow, raise, or trade. Food wasn't just part of life, it controlled life. At the center of everything was bread. Bread wasn't just a side dish. It was the meal. It was the foundation of survival. Every single day, families would grind grain by hand using heavy stones. It was slow, exhausting work that could take hours just to prepare enough flour for one meal. The dough was simple, just flour and water, sometimes a pinch of salt. Then it was shaped and baked over open fires or on heated stones. The result was dense, rough bread, nothing like the soft loaves we know today. But this bread meant life. To share bread with someone meant trust. To break bread together meant peace. And to lose bread meant starvation. Alongside bread, olive oil was one of the most important foods in daily life. It wasn't just used for cooking, it was poured over meals, used for dipping, and even applied to the body. It added flavor, energy, and richness to otherwise simple meals. Olives themselves were everywhere. Easy to grow, easy to preserve, and packed with nutrients. They were one of the ancient world's most reliable foods. Fruits were another essential part of the diet. Figs, dates, and grapes were among the most common. But these weren't eaten the way we eat fruit today. Many were dried under the sun, turning them into long-lasting sources of sweetness and energy. Imagine biting into a soft, sun-dried date after a long day of labor. That wasn't just food. It was a rare moment of comfort. Vegetables were simple and seasonal. Lentils, beans, onions, and herbs made up the bulk of many meals. Lentil stew, in particular, was a staple, thick, filling, and easy to prepare. Meat, however, was a different story. For most people, meat was rare. Animals like sheep and goats were valuable, not just for food, but for milk, wool, and labor. Killing one wasn't a daily choice. It was something done for special occasions, religious sacrifices, or important gatherings. For the average person, meat might only be eaten a few times a year. Fish was more common, especially for those living near rivers or the Sea of Galilee. Could be eaten fresh, dried, or salted to last longer. For many, it was the closest thing to a regular source of protein. And then there was wine. But not the kind you're imagining. Wine in biblical times was often diluted with water. Drinking it straight was uncommon. Clean water wasn't always easy to find. So wine became a safer, more reliable drink. It wasn't about getting drunk. It was about staying alive. Food wasn't just physical, it was deeply spiritual. Certain foods were considered clean, while others were forbidden. These rules shaped entire communities and defined identity. What you ate wasn't just about taste. It was about obedience, belief, and belonging. Meals were often shared, and sharing food had powerful meaning. Sitting together, eating from the same table, dipping bread into the same bowl, it created bonds that went far beyond hunger. But not everyone had enough. Famine was a constant threat. When rains failed or crops were destroyed, entire communities suffered. Hunger wasn't rare, it was always just one bad season away. People stored grain, dried fruits, and preserved what they could. But sometimes, it wasn't enough. And yet, even in hardship, food remained a symbol of hope. A full table meant blessing. A harvest meant survival. And bread meant life itself. When you look at food today, with endless choices, flavors, and convenience. It's easy to forget how different it once was. Back then, every bite mattered. Every meal was uncertain, and every piece of bread carried a story of struggle, survival, and faith. So the next time you sit down to eat, imagine that simple meal from 2,000 years ago. Rough bread, olive oil, a handful of dried fruit, not much by today's standards. But back then, it was everything.